everyone, it's Jill Foster here with your next PB&J card class, and today I'll be making a set of cards combining our creative die with some grungy watercolor backgrounds. And here's a look at the card we'll be creating, and I'm using the creative die Serenity and Peace along with the sentiment stamp Special Thoughts. And to begin, I am working on a piece of Canson 140-pound watercolor paper that I just die cut with a circle die. And I'm going to be painting this with the Shimmers Aqua Hues. And these are watercolors that come hard. You just add water to activate, let it sit for a few minutes, and then stir them up. And I'm painting right onto this piece of watercolor paper to create the look of a landscape background. So I started with the color of seaweed, and then I will be adding the colors Very Blueberry and now Rockin' Robin, and then I'll also add Blue Moon up at the top and also down at the bottom. And I've listed all of the exact colors of paints, inks, and also all the stamps and dies at the end of the video in a complete supply list. And what I'm doing here is just working while everything is wet and letting those colors blend together. I want lots of puddles so that when this dries I get lots of texture. So I went ahead and I hit that with the heat gun. Now I put some of that paint directly onto my work surface and pressed my piece into it to create even more texture. I'm adding a few more colors, so I'm just building and building up the color and the texture till I'm happy with the look. I can go back like I am right here with just water to blend that even more. And the reason I'm adding all of these layers is I want this to have sort of a grungy background effect. And so here I am just adding one more layer, just kind of all over the top of that so that I've got the texture of those white areas that kind of look like clouds, which I got by just dabbing a baby wipe on there, but an all over blue color for the most part up in that sky. And there I can just remove a little bit there with the baby wipe. So I let that dry, and while that's drying, I've die cut my Serenity and Peace tree die cut from Penny Black, and I'm just going to ink this with StazOn Ganache ink. And I wanted an ink that was waterproof because we'll be going back and doing a little bit more with this once it's on the circle. And I also wanted something that was dark but not quite black. So this was the perfect ink color that I had in my stash, and I'm pressing the ink pad directly to the die cut. Now I'm going to adhere this to my watercolored circle, and I'm just putting down just dots of liquid adhesive. Here I wanted a nice strong adhesive because we are going to go back and add some more painting to this once it's down. So I'll press that onto my circle, and I'm just looking here for the position that I want. Got a little wiggle room there with the liquid adhesive too if you need to move it just a bit to get it straight. And then I'll just flip that to the back and do a little pruning. I'll just trim the excess off of the circle. Now you could stop here, but I wanted to keep going with that grungy look. So I'm using some Faber-Castell Design Memory Craft Gesso. And I'm just going to put this in the lid because I'm going to be going back and forth to that paint from my watercolor panel. And that way if any of my watercolors get up on my brush, it won't contaminate the whole thing of gesso. It'll just be a little bit in the lid. And I'm just adding a highlight here along some of the branches and the trunk of the tree with the gesso. And what this does, I think, again, adds to the grungy look and helps that die cut really pop against that busy background. And I just put a little bit down, and then I can go back with just water if I need to blend that out. So you have to do that with the water before the paint dries or the gesso dries, but you do have some time. You could also do this with a colored pencil, like a white colored pencil. And there I just finished out the tree, and I'm going to add some more distress ink just to make it even grungier. I'm using Vintage Photo with a sponge applicator tool. And I went around, and then I'm also patting and pouncing on top of that dried gessoed and painted surface. And that kind of tones down the white of the gesso, but you still get that nice highlight and helps the tree really pop against the background. Now to create the background of the card, I'm inking Nina Solar White cardstock with Vintage Photo Distress ink. Starting off at the edge and working my way on. I'm not real worried about this having a really smooth application because I'm going to stamp on top. And I like the areas of light and dark. It just adds to the finished look and some variation once the stamping goes on. So I'm also putting a touch of wild honey distress ink on top of that, and I like to add wild honey a lot to my colors, especially with a neutral background, because it just warms it up just a touch, which I like. And now I'm going to stamp with my go-to stamp that I use all the time. This is Penny Black's Footnotes. And this little subtle touch of text I think really finishes off a background and can even finish off a card. If it's just not quite looking done, just this little bit of text for me seems to finish things off. So I'm randomly inking it, not worried about getting it all inked up, and then also randomly stamping it onto the background. And I apply an uneven pressure to my stamp, excuse my head there, so that it's not perfect. And then once that's down, I decided to just darken up those edges a bit now that I know how dark the text is stamped, and I did that with vintage photo ink. I stamped my sentiment and layered all of the elements onto a white note card. And here's a close-up look of that sort of grungy watercolor background with the creative dye layered on top. I did a couple other color variations, and here you can take a look at those. And at the very, very end of the video, I've listed all of the colors of inks and paints used for each color variation, so for all 3 cards. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also connect with us on Facebook, Pinterest, and Twitter, and I've linked all of those in the YouTube description box below. Here's the complete list of supplies, and if you stay tuned, the color variations are at the very end.